This afternoon on The Marketplace, banking consultant and former managing director of Bank of Africa blames government for the poor approach adopted in cleaning up the financial sector and disagreeing with the 5% tax on profit before tax of banks. We'll engage him live on the program. Also, government optimistic of meeting projected 72 billion cedis revenue targets despite challenging environment because of COVID-19. We also engage tech experts on protecting Ghana's cybersecurity space amid the global pandemic. We have all these coming up shortly after this break this day. Hello and welcome. Now, banking consultant and former managing director of the Bank of Africa, Menson Tokonu, is blaming the government for the poor approach adopted in cleaning up the financial sector. According to him, the best method was to consolidate some of the distressed banks and appoint administrators to run the banks rather than putting all into one institution. Mr. Tokonu tells Joy Business it's unfair for existing banks to bear the cost created as a result of collapsing banks, adding that consumers will bear the brunt of the cost. He joins us via Zoom together with the chief executive of the Ghana Association of Bankers for more on his point of view. Mr. Menson, we're so grateful that you joined us. First of all, is it fair to impose 5% tax on profit before tax on the banks as, stipulated in the 2021 budget? Well, as we try and get Benson on the line, we now reconnect to John Ewa of the Bankers Association, and we're grateful that you joined us. Will you accept the 5% tax on profit before tax on your members? I'm afraid we're having some issues there, but as you do know, the main topic for discussion on this particular issue, this connection to them, is regards the 5% profit before tax, which is going to be imposed on several banks as stipulated in the 2021 budget. Already we're having various concerns from the banking industry. We're having several forms of reactions to this, and both gentlemen are going to be helping us with their point of view. They both seem not concerned, much more concerned about this development. I think we have Menson once again on the line, and if you could hear me once again, the question to you was that is it definitely fair for government to have imposed a 5% tax on profit before tax on the banks?
As an industry, we believe that if, as a country, we have this huge fiscal deficit, we must have a plan to address the deficit. We believe we have differences in opinion as to how to approach the cleanup of the fiscal gap. Is the approach that the policymakers are currently pursuing, which we believe can potentially be explosive and counterproductive. Yes, we believe the fiscal gap must be addressed, but we do not subscribe to an industry such as the banking sector, which basically at this time is needed the most to help with the national recovery process, should be the target of additional layers of taxes. You
described the initiative, the intervention, as explosive and counterproductive. Explain to us the reason behind this description.
During crisis period and uncertain times, the most popular stand as financial institutions to take is for banks to have closed their lending taps. But what did banks do during the pandemic? We basically closed our ranks and said, this is the time for us to stay true to our customers. It is the time to assist with the national economic recovery, such that the health pandemic did not metamorphose into significant economic pandemic as well. And that is why during the crisis, we came down in response to the regulatory measures announced by the Bank of Ghana, came down on a lending rate from between 150 basis points to 350 basis points. During the crisis, we also made sure that the wheels of the country was grinding by availing credit in excess of 14.9 billion Ghana cedis in new credit during the pendency of the pandemic. We know that the banking sector should be at the forefront of any economic recovery process post-COVID. And therefore, we need all the help we can get, all the capital we can muster to be able to provide the ammunition to the productive sectors to get us out of the quagmire we find ourselves in as a country because of course, the negative impact of the pandemic. So we do not think this is the time to layer the banking system with taxes, and particularly for the rationale that was given or has been given for the reason behind the new taxes that banks are supposed to be bearing. We do not think the rationale is justified. That yes, we believe that the banking sector debt cleanup should be taken care of, but we believe and a strong conviction that assignment, the beneficiaries have been a country Ghana, the economy Ghana, industries and sectors within Ghana, people and persons in the country. And therefore, if we are seeking to address that gap, it should be levied across board so that we all pay a little piece of it, and together we can then help to address it. But to target the industry, the remaining banks, for the sins of the banks that went under, it's more or less punishing banks that from the regulators' perspective have done the best to stay afloat even in the midst of challenges.
Well, John, we're so grateful that you joined us. But of course, let's not rake in Menson here. Of course, you did hear from Mr. Iwuade on the need for this whole introduction to be reviewed. He terms it destructive and explosive and counterproductive. In your own term, do you think the 5% tax on profit before tax on the banks is fair enough?
No, in my opinion, it's not justified. I don't see the reason why the government should impose the 5% on banks. Now, remember that even if the banks are going to be responsible, you and I, as private citizens, we are going to bear the brunt. So I don't think it is justified at all.
Well, so paint the picture for us, the trickle-down effect. Of course, if this gets approved in Parliament, we're going to be seeing the payments come on. Paint the trickle-down effects on the prospects of service charges. Are we going to be seeing banks having to transfer the costs to that of the consumers?
Yeah, when you walk back a little bit, you will realize that the reason why this tax is being imposed on the banks and otherwise on the citizens is because of the closure of all the defaulting, as it were, financial institutions.
Yes.
For me, I think it was a big mistake by government.
Great. So now, we get that argument. We get that argument, but we want to find out from you the trickle-down effect this could have on service charges and other forms of the value chain of banking in Ghana.
Oh, honestly, the banks are going to increase some of the charges that they impose on customers. Withdrawals, when you issue a check and you withdraw cash from the bank, you know that the banks, they will charge you. Commission on turnover, that is the charges that the banks levy on customers at the end of every month is going to increase.
All right.
Even when you request for checkbook, there's going to be an increase in it. They're going to spread it on all the charges that they charge customers. So it's going to affect you and I.
Menson, we're so grateful that you joined us with your thoughts there, together with Mr. Iwuade. We're grateful that you gave us your understanding of the remits in terms of impact the 5% profit before tax could have on the banking industry. The 2021 budget has placed limits on the amount of money government can borrow. The move is part of efforts to check the country's rising debt stock. George Rafi has been going through the document and has the rest of the story.
The policy, which is part of the Ministry of Finance's broader debt sustainability program, will ensure that limits are placed on borrowings going forward. For the first time, according to the document, the limit will also be placed on loans secured from the country's development partners and international agencies, which often comes at a zero interest rate and are spread over a long period. This should ensure that there is reduction in the rate of debt accumulation going forward. The strategy, according to government, is being implemented in a way that will ensure that the cost of servicing these loans doesn't exceed the amount borrowed, which it believes will help in making our debt sustainable. Well, for those who want to appreciate these limits in nominal terms, the Finance Ministry says it won't borrow more than $5 billion from the capital market. Of this amount, up to $3.5 billion should come under liability management, while concessional and non-concessional loans for projects should not exceed $2.5 billion. It is the belief of government that if these measures are strictly enforced, it will go a long way to slow the rate of growth of the country's debt stock, which has reached 291 billion Ghana cedis as at the end of December 2020. Some economists have argued that the rising debt stock poses the biggest threat to the stability of the economy.
Now, government has given the firm assurance of meeting the projected revenue target for this year, despite the challenging economic environment due to COVID-19. According to the 2021 budget, government is therefore seeking to raise about 72 billion Ghana cedis in taxes and grants. However, there are fears that the country will struggle to meet the target as businesses are still struggling to recover from the shocks of COVID-19. Charles Eduboahin is President's Special Representative at the Finance Ministry.
What we've tried to do is juxtapose consolidation or fiscal prudence or discipline against stimulus, because you need the stimulus to be able to lift yourself out of essentially a recession, which is what we are finding ourselves in. But at the same time, you have a situation where you have elevated debt levels, and you have, because you had to borrow so much last year, that you also you can't afford to spend excessively. So the challenge is to identify real growth areas, oriented areas, and target your investments, which is what we are trying to do through the Ghana Cares program, and also try and bring the private sector along. And that's why, if it's a 100 billion package, we are asking the private sector to support with foreign direct investments and their investments into this opportunity for up to the tune of 70 billion, and government to come up with a 30 billion. So it is a shared partnership. It is a way for us to be able to, pull the economy out of a recession with a fiscal stimulus, but really target on growth areas. Something like real estate, housing, construction really creates a lot of jobs, creates a lot of activity, is infrastructure oriented, and that is an area that we really want to support. We're setting up the development bank. We'll capitalize the development bank. The development bank will in turn identify and support businesses with cheaper loans, like any other big development bank you see, like IFC and so forth, who are able to borrow at AAA rated levels and lend at much cheaper rates than you see your typical commercial banks lending at. So these are some of the areas that we believe that if we can invest in, we can provide the stimulus to lift this economy back out, and the productivity will be there. But first and foremost, we have to address the health issue. And we address the health issue by making sure everybody has been vaccinated. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't get back to work. This pandemic won't go away because you will not attain herd immunity, and you might get well today, tomorrow you get back sick, you pick it up again, and it just keeps going on. So the first step is to fix the health situation and get the economy back on track, and then we move from there.
Well, away from that, Islamic banking is being promoted as a viable financial option for Ghana's development. A 2-day seminar has been organized at the KNUST Business School to enlighten participants on the banking option. Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin has more in this report.
The gap between the very rich and the very poor. And when we look at countries like Indonesia, for instance, look at countries like Ghana.
Although based on Sharia principles, Islamic banking is not restricted to Muslims only. The Islamic banking model is based on the principle of profit sharing, whereby the risk is shared between the bank and the customer. This system of financial intermediation contributes to a fairer distribution of income and wealth. Professor Mohammed Kamil Nail says strong ethical, moral dimensions of doing business and selecting business activities to be financed play an important role in promoting socially desirable investments and better individual or corporate behavior.
For instance, if I come to the bank and I tell the bank I have a business that I'm doing, I need 1,000 Ghana cedi to invest in my business. Instead of the bank giving me a loan and I will pay interest, here the bank may have one of the contracts we call Mudaraba, which is the bank will give me the 1,000, but the bank will have to ensure I'm a credit-worthy person. And the bank gives the 1,000. I will use the 1,000 and invest it in my business. The profit I accrue from that business, I share with the bank the profits based on what we have agreed upon. Maybe the bank bringing 1,000, the bank now can take, let's say, 60% of the profits, and I take 40% of the profits. And the next year come round, if you agree, then the bank will give me another money, the same 1,000, and then end of the year we have the profit, then we share 60-40. If by the time I get my second 40, it means now I have enough capital to stand on my own, then I return the capital of the bank to him, and therefore no more risk, and therefore I can now manage my business.
An independent investigation is done on individuals seeking financial assistance from Islamic Bank to verify their potential growth capacity. Companies whose financial practices and operations are too risky are generally left out by Islamic financing companies.
Yes. For that one, if you go currently in all the banks in Ghana, whether Islamic or not Islamic, all banks, they do that. Before they give you a loan, they check your credit worthiness. They check to see whether you have loans elsewhere. They ask you to bring your pay slip, right? They ask you to bring your pay slip. They check how much is your salary, how much can you take based on your salary. If they take this amount of money from you monthly, can you survive? Do you have family? Do you have other things to pay? All these are questions that they do just to be able to check your background.
Through intensive audit and analysis, Islamic banking promotes risk reduction and creates space for a greater investment stability. According to Professor Nile, in the Islamic banking industry, each bank will invest in promising business ventures and attempt to outperform its competitors. This, he says, will translate into a high return on investments both for the bank and depositors. A report by Mohammed Nuruddin.
Well, that's how we end this edition of Marketplace. My name is Charles Ayete. Many thanks for watching.